There are certain additional high crimes and misdemeanors specifically identified in the text of the Constitution, correct? Yes, that's true. What are they? Treason and bribery. Did President Trump's demands on Ukraine also establish the high crime of bribery? Folks, Congress just made a move that has Donald Trump absolutely spiraling, and the fallout we're witnessing right now tells you everything about where this situation is truly headed. This wasn't some symbolic gesture or political theater designed for cable news sound bites. This was a concrete action with real consequences. And Trump's reaction? It has been nothing short of chaotic. Let me walk you through what actually happened, why it matters more than people realize, and what the numbers tell us about the road ahead. Because while headlines are screaming about meltdowns and bombshells, the substance underneath is what you truly need to understand. So here's what went down. The House Oversight Committee, after weeks of closed-door discussions and legal consultations, voted to authorize subpoenas for Trump's financial records dating back to 2016. We're talking tax returns, business dealings, loan applications, foreign transactions, and communications with financial institutions. This isn't a fishing expedition. The committee has outlined specific allegations of financial misconduct, potential emoluments violations, and critical questions about foreign influence that these records would directly address. The vote wasn't even close. The committee approved the subpoena authority with every Democrat voting yes, and 3 Republicans either abstaining or voting present. That detail matters because it shows cracks forming in places where Trump used to have solid protection. These aren't Democrats from deep blue districts taking a symbolic stand. These are members who've been quietly distancing themselves from Trump's legal chaos for months, and now they're doing it on the record. Within hours of the vote, Trump's response started flooding social media. And folks, this wasn't strategic communication from a disciplined political operation. This was pure, raw, emotional reaction. He posted 17 times in the span of 3 hours, calling the committee members corrupt liars and political hacks. He claimed the subpoenas were illegal, unconstitutional, and part of a coordinated witch hunt. He threatened lawsuits, called for protests, and demanded that Republican leadership shut down the entire process. But here's what makes this different from previous Trump outbursts. His legal team isn't backing up the rhetoric. Usually when Trump goes on these tirades, you'll see his attorneys filing motions, holding press conferences, or at least releasing statements that frame the legal strategy. This time, silence. His lawyers know these subpoenas are legally sound, and fighting them in court would mean losing publicly and setting unwelcome precedents. They don't want those precedents established. That's the context people need to grasp. Trump is melting down not because he thinks he can win this fight, but because he knows he can't. And when you're someone who's built an entire political identity on projecting strength and never admitting defeat, that realization triggers exactly the kind of unhinged response we're witnessing. Let's talk numbers for a second, because the political math here is straightforward. The Oversight Committee has the constitutional authority to issue subpoenas as part of its investigative powers. Courts have consistently upheld this authority when the investigation serves a legitimate legislative purpose. The committee has documented multiple legislative interests, from strengthening ethics laws to examining emoluments enforcement to investigating financial disclosure requirements. Trump's team can challenge these subpoenas, and they probably will, but the legal path forward for them is narrow. They'd need to prove the committee is acting in bad faith, that the subpoenas serve no legitimate purpose, or that they're unconstitutionally broad. None of those arguments hold up when you look at the careful way the committee has structured this investigation. What we're seeing in Trump's reaction is the recognition that his financial records are about to become part of the congressional record. These documents will be reviewed by investigators, summarized in reports, and potentially made public in redacted form. Years of careful image management about his wealth, his business success, and his financial independence could unravel very quickly. Now, let me be clear about what this does and doesn't mean. This subpoena authorization doesn't automatically result in criminal charges. It doesn't remove Trump from any ballot. It doesn't freeze his assets or shut down his businesses. What it does is create transparency where there's been obstruction, and it gives Congress the tools to examine whether laws were broken and whether new legislation is needed. But the political implications are massive. Trump has spent years claiming he's under audit and can't release his taxes. He's insisted his businesses are thriving and his finances are clean. He's portrayed himself as independently wealthy and not beholden to any foreign interests. These records will either confirm those claims or expose them as fabrications. And there's no middle ground here. The timeline matters too. The committee has set a compliance deadline of 30 days. That's aggressive, but legally defensible. It signals that they're not interested in dragging this out through election cycles. They want answers now, and they're prepared to enforce compliance through the courts if necessary. Trump's allies in Congress tried to slow this down. They proposed amendments to narrow the scope, delay the vote, or require additional legal review. Every single one of those amendments failed. The committee's Democratic majority held together completely, and the handful of Republicans who might have provided cover stayed on the sidelines instead. That tells you something important about the political environment. Trump's grip on the Republican Party isn't what it used to be. Sure, he still commands loyalty from the base and fear from many elected officials, but when it comes to defending his personal financial dealings against congressional scrutiny, the appetite for going to bat for him has diminished significantly. Let's look at what happened after the vote, because this is where Trump's response went from angry to genuinely concerning for his team. He started attacking specific committee members by name, posting personal information about their districts, and encouraging his supporters to make their voices heard. That kind of language, especially directed at members of Congress conducting legitimate oversight, crosses lines that even his most loyal defenders struggle to justify. Several prominent Republicans issued statements essentially saying, "We support oversight," or "Congress has a job to do," without explicitly criticizing Trump. That's politician speak for, "We're not defending this behavior." When your own party starts creating distance like that, it's a clear sign that the political calculation has shifted. The financial records at the center of this fight aren't just about Trump personally. They involve his businesses, his family members who've held government positions, and transactions that occurred while he was in office. The committee has indicated specific areas of focus: loans from foreign banks, income from foreign governments through his properties, potential conflicts of interest in policy decisions, and discrepancies between what he reported to lenders versus what he reported to tax authorities. Each of those areas carries serious legal and political exposure. If the records show he received loans from entities connected to foreign governments while making policy decisions affecting those governments, that's a clear emoluments problem. If they show he inflated assets to secure loans while deflating them for tax purposes, that's potential fraud. If they show income streams that contradict his public claims about divesting from his businesses, that undermines years of statements about avoiding conflicts of interest. Trump's meltdown also included threats to withhold cooperation on other legislative matters, demands that Republicans block all Democratic initiatives, and suggestions that his supporters should primary any Republican who doesn't fight these subpoenas. That scattershot approach to political pressure might work with a narrow margin in a closely divided Congress, but it doesn't work when the committee has clear authority and solid majorities for its investigative actions. Here's where this gets interesting from a strategic standpoint. Trump's lawyers have basically three options: comply with the subpoenas, fight them in court, or ignore them and face contempt proceedings. Compliance would be humiliating and potentially devastating. Fighting in court delays things, but ultimately leads to the same place with added legal fees and public attention. Ignoring them triggers contempt, which creates even worse optics and gives Congress additional enforcement tools. None of those options are good. And Trump's public meltdown suggests he knows it. When politicians face difficult choices with clear paths forward, they usually project confidence and stick to talking points. When they face situations with no good options, they lash out, attack everyone around them, and try to change the subject through sheer volume of outrage. That's what we're seeing here. The committee chair gave a pretty restrained statement after the vote. No gloating, no personal attacks, just a straightforward explanation that Congress has oversight responsibilities and these subpoenas serve legitimate legislative purposes. That measured tone actually makes Trump's reaction look even more unhinged. By contrast, when one side is calm and procedural while the other is melting down on social media, the public perception gap becomes significant. Let's talk about what happens next, because the process from here is pretty well defined. The subpoenas will be formally issued to the relevant financial institutions and Trump's accounting firms. Those entities will almost certainly comply because they have no legal basis to refuse and no interest in being held in contempt of Congress. Trump will probably sue to block enforcement, which triggers a court process that could take weeks or months, but historically has favored congressional subpoena power in cases like this. During that court process, we'll see exactly how much support Trump actually has from Republican leadership. Will they file amicus briefs supporting his position? Will they hold press conferences defending his right to privacy? Will they threaten political retaliation against the committee? Or will they stay quiet and let the legal process play out? My guess, based on the reaction so far, is that they'll do the absolute minimum required to avoid angering Trump's base while avoiding any actions that would tie them directly to defending his financial opacity. The financial institutions receiving these subpoenas aren't political actors. They're banks and accounting firms with legal obligations and professional reputations to protect. When Congress issues a valid subpoena backed by clear authority, these institutions comply. They don't want to be dragged into political fights, held in contempt, or subjected to their own investigations for obstruction. The path of least resistance for them is to hand over the records and let the politicians argue about what they mean. That reality is probably driving Trump's panic more than anything else. He can't threaten these institutions the way he threatens political allies. He can't primary a bank. He can't tweet an accounting firm into submission. The normal tools he uses to intimidate and control situations don't work in this context, and that loss of control is clearly triggering the meltdown we're witnessing. There's also the question of what these records might reveal beyond Trump himself. His family members held senior White House positions. His businesses interacted with foreign governments. His properties hosted foreign officials and dignitaries. The financial trail from all of that activity could implicate people who are still politically active, still running businesses, and still trying to maintain public profiles built on claims of propriety and success. If the records show problematic financial arrangements involving those family members, it doesn't just damage Trump personally. It creates legal and political exposure for a whole network of people who've built their identities around association with him. That's why you're seeing some unusual silence from corners that would normally be defending Trump loudly. People are calculating their own exposure, not just his. The committee has also made it clear they're not going to be satisfied with partial compliance or redacted documents. They want complete financial records, and they've structured the subpoenas to close obvious loopholes that might be used to withhold information. That level of specificity suggests they've been preparing for this moment carefully, anticipating every legal argument Trump's team might make and preempting those challenges in the subpoena language itself. Trump's response included claims that this is all politically motivated and timed to damage him during an election cycle. But here's the thing. Oversight doesn't stop during election years. Congress doesn't lose its constitutional authority because someone being investigated might run for office. That argument might resonate with his base, but it doesn't hold up legally or as a matter of principle. What's notable about this whole situation is how it demonstrates the limits of political loyalty when legal exposure becomes real. Trump built a movement based on personal allegiance, and that's kept him protected through multiple scandals and investigations. But financial records aren't subject to spin or alternative facts. They either show what Trump claimed or they don't. They either reveal problematic transactions or they don't. And when that moment of truth approaches, the people who've been defending him start getting very quiet. The meltdown we're seeing is Trump recognizing that his ability to control narratives through sheer force of personality and media dominance has limits. He can call the committee corrupt all he wants, but that doesn't stop the subpoenas. He can threaten political consequences, but that doesn't change the legal authority Congress has. He can demand loyalty from Republicans, but that doesn't mean they'll risk their own credibility defending financial arrangements they haven't seen and can't vouch for. This is a moment where institutional processes are moving forward despite political resistance. And that's exactly what should make Trump nervous, because if these subpoenas succeed, and legally speaking they probably will, it sets a precedent that congressional oversight can penetrate the walls he's built around his financial dealings. And once that precedent exists, it becomes harder to resist future investigations using the same authority. So where does this leave us? Congress has taken a concrete step with clear legal authority. Trump is responding with panic and chaos rather than coherent legal strategy. His allies are noticeably quiet or creating distance. The institutions that hold his financial records have no incentive to defy congressional subpoenas, and the legal path forward favors transparency over obstruction. That's not speculation or wishful thinking. That's just reading the situation as it exists right now. Trump's meltdown isn't changing the underlying reality. It's confirming that he understands exactly how serious this moment is. And when someone with his history of projecting confidence and strength starts acting this erratically, it tells you everything you need to know about what he thinks these records might reveal. The committee will get the documents. The question is what's in them and what happens next. But the meltdown we're witnessing right now, that's the reaction of someone who knows the walls are closing in and the usual escape routes aren't available this time. That's the story coming out of Washington. And honestly, the chaos of the response tells you more than any statement from either side could. We'll keep watching how this develops, but the momentum is pretty clear at this point.